money to move out. I need money for a car. I need money to get my license.
You worrying and you going through day-to-day life with so much that you face with.
I feel like I'm constantly playing catch up. I'll get so far and then something else will get thrown at me.
I couldn't even buy my kids nothing for Christmas because I had to choose between making that car payment or getting them something.
It's not in the falling, it's in the getting back up that makes you who you are.
You just have to keep pushing no matter what.
Programming on WTTW is made possible in part by viewers like you and by the following.
Hey, bud, how's pajama day?
It means school picture day.
No.
Life isn't always simple, but eating Heart Smart for American Heart Month is. Look for displays of heart-healthy California walnuts at Jewel Osco.
WTTW programming originates from the Renee Crown Public Media Center. Programming that enriches lives on WTTW is made possible in part by the estate of WTTW's longtime trustee, Marv Goldsmith.
Hey, bud, how's pajama day?
It means school picture day.
No.
Life isn't always simple, but eating Heart Smart for American Heart Month is. Look for displays of heart-healthy California walnuts at Jewel Osco.
On Masterpiece.
Good turnout for the Derby Fair.
You're representing the practice.
I'm honoured.
Perhaps I'll take a turn.
If Clive takes first prize, we could get a really good price.
Not riding on the sale of that bull for the Aldersons.
All creatures, great and small, on Masterpiece.
Sunday at 8 on WTTW.
Hi, Chicago. My name is Greg, and you're watching WTTW.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the generosity of the Lloyd A. Fry Foundation.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz will join us later in the program. On the show tonight,
we can debate it if we wish, but we can't drag our feet. We can't waste a day.
Senator Dick Durbin on efforts to get President Biden's COVID relief plan passed as Republicans decry a, quote, bipartisan or partisan approach from Democrats.
I'm ready to go back whenever.
What's the status for Chicago Public Schools as a cooling off period comes to a close? We've got the latest.
I'm waiting my turn.
The governor awaits his vaccine shot as he redirects nearly 100,000 doses, some going into lawmakers' arms. That's just one of the stories for our Spotlight Politics team. The head of McCormick Place on how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the convention industry, plus plans for the convention center to bounce back this year. A new archive details the alleged torture carried out by John Burge and his crew against dozens of men. And looking at the impact incarceration has on people's lives once they get out of prison.
We want our students in the future to be able to feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to their work.
And how a nonprofit is working to change the face of classical music. But first, some of today's top stories. After 4 years and multiple rounds of city, state, and federal reviews, the Obama Center is finally ready to break ground in Jackson Park. Preliminary work on utility lines could begin as soon as April, with an official groundbreaking happening in August, according to the Obama Foundation. The news comes after preliminary approval from the National Park Service and the Federal Highway Administration, although the foundation says it is still awaiting final receipt of those documents. The Jackson Park location received pushback from local preservation groups, arguing it would alter the character of the historic park, and the foundation has been involved in heated negotiations with nearby residents groups to halt the spread of gentrification. In a video released today, former President Barack Obama said the project will help catalyze the South Side.
The past 12 months have been among the most challenging in our history. I know they've hit Chicago hard, particularly for residents on the south and west sides who've shouldered devastating health consequences from COVID-19, faced higher unemployment rates, and more. But hopefully, 2021 offers a turning point for our nation and our city.
Efforts are underway to speed up the relatively slow rate of COVID vaccinations in Illinois. State health officials announced today they are temporarily redirecting 97,000 unused vaccine doses to those currently eligible under the current phase. The doses will come from the partnership program with CVS and Walgreens to vaccinate residents of long-term care facilities. Those facilities have been allocated more than 496,000 doses, but only about 163,000 have been administered, according to the latest data available from the Illinois Department of Public Health. Meanwhile, state public health officials report 3,300 new cases of the coronavirus in the last 24 hours, with 69 additional deaths. That makes for a statewide total of 1,134,000 cases and 19,375 deaths. And now to Paris and Illinois' senior U.S. Senator in a conversation recorded earlier today, just before the Senate approved a power-sharing agreement between Democrats and Republicans. Paris.
Brandis, the clock is ticking in Washington, D.C. on several fronts. Negotiations on a nearly $2 trillion COVID relief bill, the impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump, and confirmation of President Joe Biden's remaining cabinet members, including Attorney General nominee Merrick Garland. And at the center of many of these issues is Illinois senior U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, who is today expected to take over as chair of the all-important Senate Judiciary Committee. And Senator Dick Durbin joins us now. Senator, thanks for being back with us.
Good to be with you, Paris.
Let's outline again for viewers what's in the $1.9 trillion COVID stimulus bill. It includes $1,400 individual checks, $400 unemployment insurance supplemental income, and money for state and local governments. Senator Durbin, will a final COVID stimulus bill include that money for state and local governments? Because Republicans have opposed that measure so far.
I think it will, but there are other provisions. Don't forget all the vaccine provisions and the money for states to deliver vaccinations. That is really the starting point of the bill, and President Biden made it a priority. But here's what we face. We'll pass the budget resolution today or tomorrow, the next day. Then we'll go into the impeachment trial next week. Then we have a break for the president's birthdays. And then we start what's known as reconciliation. Reconciliation is where the money is. That's where we finally get down to the question of whether we have 50 votes of the 50-50 Senate, 50 Democratic votes to support the Biden relief proposal.
And that reconciliation process has already started, so that means you would only need a party line votes if all Democrats were in line on it. You wouldn't need Republicans. Here's what Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had to say about that process.
They've chosen a totally partisan path. I can't remember a budget in the time that I've been here that either side has ever voted in a bipartisan way, so we're off to a totally partisan start.
So, Senator Durbin, if you do continue on that path with reconciliation and not just getting the 60-vote filibuster-proof majority, which would require at least 10 Republican senators, does this poison the well of bipartisanship for future efforts under the Biden administration?
I would say Senator McConnell had a Casablanca moment, shocked, absolutely shocked at the notion that anyone would go through reconciliation and just have one party voting on the side of passage. He did it himself, and they did it to give the tax breaks to people in higher income categories. That was part of his package for reconciliation. But let me say, to be honest with you, I'd like to see more bipartisanship, and I salute the 10 Republican senators who went to the White House 2 days ago, sat down with President Biden for 2 straight hours, and one-on-one dealt with the issues before us. They didn't agree on the total amount to be spent, but they agreed on many parts of it. And the Republican senators who went there, I spoke to afterwards, were so heartened by the fact that Biden took their offer to help seriously, sat down with them, gave them his time, and gave them point of views and exchanged with respect their different positions. What a change that is over what we faced for the last 4 years.
So it doesn't mean that there might be some kind of compromise between those two camps. I want to ask you, Senator, the governor and Mayor Lightfoot have blamed the federal government for a slow vaccine rollout, especially here in Chicago and Illinois. Are there any imminent steps Congress can take, the federal government can take to speed that process up, specifically in Chicago and Illinois?
Well, let's call it for what it is. The Warp Speed program under President Trump brought together the researchers and the scientists And they, with financial incentives, ended up finding the right formula and starting the production. Unfortunately, they did not follow through when it came to distribution of the vaccine. And that's why when President Biden showed up about 11 or 12 days ago, he realized we had to really make a conscious effort to get more vaccine into the arms of people across America. When he became president, there was more vaccine in the freezers than there was in the arms of Americans. We're changing that. Good news, Governor Pritzker is really leading the nation. We're in the top 10 in terms of the percent of vaccinations. Hats off to him. It's a hard job. But we've got to keep the pressure on him. He's got to do more. We've got to see more and more Illinoisans vaccinated. I know around the state when I call around to these TV shows and do these Zoom calls, people tell me their frustration in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois, and other places. And I find it even in Springfield. We can do better. We've got to have a better system of producing, distributing, and actually injecting these vaccinations into the arms of people in Illinois.
And indeed, this is a sticking point right now in the CPS-CTU negotiations. I want to move on to impeachment, Senator. As you mentioned, next week, Senator Lindsey Graham has said there shouldn't be witnesses called because it could open up a, quote, Pandora's box. Will there be witnesses, and how deep will this trial go?
I don't know the answer to that. I will tell you that this is a different kind of trial. We have 100 senators who are on the jury, but 100 senators who were also eyewitnesses. We were in the Senate chamber when the mob came rushing through the Capitol. We were evacuated from that chamber. It isn't as if we have to be reminded. We'll never forget that day as long as we live. But I want to make sure there is a record of what actually happened. We have volumes of videotapes and photographs and other disclosures that should be put into the record. And the reason is very basic. 40% of President Trump's followers refused to believe that he had anything to do with it or that his supporters had anything to do with it. They blame Antifa and Black Lives Matter and other groups you've never heard of. That kind of notion has to be debunked by fact. We've got to make a record in this impeachment trial of what actually occurred so future generations know this outrageous day in the history of the Capitol.
As it stands right now, I mean, it doesn't appear to have nearly enough Republican senators, 17 it would need to convict. Speaking of the sixth, Senator Durbin, you've called for Congress to consider a bill you sponsored, the domestic terrorism bill. Remind us what that bill would do and whether you feel safe right now, as some of your colleagues in the House say they don't.
Let me tell you the facts of the matter. You may remember 8 or 9 years ago up in Wisconsin when a Sikh temple was attacked and people were killed. And it was a hate crime. There was no question about it. I held a hearing here in Washington on it. And it became obvious to me that the groups that were involved in this white nationalism and white supremacy were growing in intensity and danger to the general population of America. That has increased apace ever since. And since then, I have introduced legislation calling on the Department of Justice to stop just looking at international terrorism, look at America born and bred terrorism. That's what we saw on January 6th, right here in Washington, D.C. I want to make sure we catalog these crimes, which we know are getting more violent, and that we provide more resources to state and local governments to fight this phenomena. I want to keep America safe, whether the terrorism is being imported or homegrown.
And while this is being considered, Senator, at this very moment, you are expected to take over as a chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, depending on when the Senate votes to approve this power-sharing agreement that McConnell and Schumer have struck up in this 50-50 divided Senate. You've criticized the former chairman, Senator Lindsey Graham, for slow-walking the nomination of Attorney General Merrick Garland. Now that it appears you're going to take over here, when will that nomination and those hearings go forward?
I'm trying to find a day that we can do the hearing. I suggested next Monday because it's the day before the impeachment trial, but the Republicans objected. They said we don't want anything that week other than the impeachment trial. I reminded him on Trump's first impeachment, Chairman Graham, the Republican chairman, held a hearing the Monday before the trial started on Tuesday, but he wouldn't give me the same opportunity. So I'm looking for the first available date to do it afterwards. The Attorney General is one of the key players when it comes to the national security of the United States, Department of Defense, Department of State, the intelligence agencies, Department of Homeland Security, and the Attorney General. The last one left. I want to get this man on the job as quickly as possible for the security of this country.
Why do you believe that this nomination's been held up by Senator Graham and other Republicans?
Well, I can't explain it. And I want to work with these Republican senators who disagreed with this hearing. I think they've made a mistake, and I wish they'd have thought twice before they made their decision. But I'm not going to burn this bridge. I've got to find ways to work with them in the future. I'm just going to do it as quickly as I can and play by the rules.
And a bridge that might be burned down the road is the filibuster. There are Democrats who have said that the Senate filibuster rules should be dissolved, where you can just pass future legislation on that simple 51-vote majority as opposed to the filibuster-proof 60. Do you support ending the filibuster? Two of your Democratic colleagues are in opposition to it. Do you support it?
What I support is for the Senate getting something done. Over the last 4 years, the Senate has been out to lunch. And the big problems facing America, we didn't even bring legislation to the floor. The House of Representatives passed hundreds of bills, and Senator McConnell would not take up one of them. They just sat there, bill after bill. And the filibuster was one of the problems we faced. We couldn't move a bill because the 60-vote requirement was included. So I want to get things done. And if we can do it with the filibuster, so be it. If we have to look at the filibuster and its future in the Senate, I'm willing to do that too. I've got an open mind, but I want the Senate to produce for America.
It sounds like that's something that's going to be debated for the next several weeks and months. Senator Durbin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Paris.
And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thank you. Late word from Chicago Public Schools this evening, just a few minutes ago, updating us on negotiations with the Chicago Teachers Union. As a 48-hour cooling-off period comes to a close, the two sides are still negotiating on how to reopen schools. Amanda Vinicky has been following this story this week, and she joins us now. Amanda.
Yeah, Brandis, about now, actually marks the end of that 48-hour cooling off period that was announced by CPS and Mayor Lightfoot on Monday night. And at the time, they had said that there was significant progress in their talks with CTU and that they were going to continue bargaining. And that's what happened. They met all day yesterday, and the mayor last night said, "We'll give you updates as negotiations progress." They met again all day today. Really, it was radio silence until just about 7 p.m. when the mayor did release a statement, and it is short. Discussions continue between CPS and CTU. We will provide an update as quickly as possible later this evening, is all that it said. So what does that leave in store? Well, really, three options. One, they're going to come to a deal. Two, another extension of remote learning as both sides try to get to an agreement, or CPS saying enough is enough. Teachers have to return to schools according to the district's reopening plan. The union says that its teachers are going to keep on working remotely. CTU is prepared to strike if CPS locks them out of their virtual classrooms. That's what's happened already to some teachers.
I have been locked out and unable to teach my students since January 12th. So this is the 16th day that I have been unable to teach my students.
Which means that Linda Perales hasn't gotten paid for that time either. CPS considers her AWOL.
Absence without leave, but that contradicts their own definition of what AWOL means. AWOL means absent for 10 consecutive days. And that means like no notification, no one knows where you are, no one has heard from you. But it's like, I'm not AWOL because I'm here ready to teach. You're the one that has cut off my access to my Google Classroom.
Perales is a special education or cluster teacher at Corkery School in the predominantly Latinx Little Village. She was among the pre-K and cluster teachers expected back in the classroom as of early January. For a few weeks, those students were able to go back to school, but they, like all other CPS students, are back to all remote now as CPS and CTU's bargaining has gotten more intense. A district spokesperson says that staff from that first return to school wave will remain AWOL unless they clock in or unless they provide a valid excuse for their absences. And CPS says that as of today, 48 teachers and paraprofessionals are considered AWOL, and that is down, CPS says, from 143 when it was initially announced back January 11th. Now, for Perales, she thought hard before about her reasons for remaining remote.
I'm quote unquote young. I'm 33. I'm healthy, and I wanted to stay that way. No one knows how COVID can impact people. It's like people can be young and they can get gravely, ill with COVID-19. I want to have kids one day. I want to, build a life with my partner. And for CPS to blatantly ignore all of that and not make a real plan that prioritizes the safety of teachers and the community and our students is infuriating.
Now, we also wanted to get perspective from a CPS student. Nathaniel Martinez is 16 years old, so we're not asking him to weigh in on the battle between CPS and CTU. We just wanted to know how things are going for him. Martinez was about halfway through his freshman year at Roosevelt High in Albany Park last March when learning went remote. If he had the opportunity, he says he'd go back.
I'm just waiting till when we get that opportunity so I can go back and do my thing, see my friends again.
Martinez is a leader with Community United, and he's in the gaming club.
We just talk to each other, we play together. I got into 3 games now. There's Minecraft we all can play, Brawlhalla, which is a game that's it's like similar to Smash Bros. And Among Us.
I wanted to know if, like me, he is sick of staring at a screen all day long. And he said, as a gamer, that it doesn't bother him. He says most students have their cameras off during remote learning anyway, but he does say that he is sick of typing. And that gets to the heart of why Martinez says that he's ready to get back into the classroom.
I mean, I enjoy going to school physically there because not only is there less distractions, but you can interact with more people. It's easier to work with others. And if you're doing any project, you can just go to your classmate and just make a little plan. You guys can go somewhere and then do that. Or you guys can also ask assistance from teachers.
Now, mind you that Martinez is in high school and there are no immediate plans for CPS high schoolers to move away from virtual learning. The question as it stands now is over whether special education and whether pre-K through 8th grade teachers have to go back to their physical classrooms. And we, of course, will keep our eyes, ears, and inboxes open for any news on that front. Brandis, back to you.
Amanda, thank you. Chicago's convention industry, like others, took a huge financial hit when COVID-19 shut down the city. McCormick Place, North America's largest convention center, is looking to rebound this summer with dozens of events scheduled through the end of the year. So how might conventions look different this year? The head of the corporation controlling McCormick Place and Navy Pier is here to tell us. Joining us now is Larita Clark, CEO of the Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority. Larita, thank you for joining us. So,
thank you for having me.
Of course, you took on this leadership role about a year ago, January 2020. Now, that's a few months before the pandemic shut everything down. What has this year been like for you?
This year has been interesting. We had our last event in the All-Star weekend, you may recall, back in February of 2020. And since then, we have been monitoring all of the safety requirements from the federal government and the state and the city government, just to ensure that when the time is right, that our events can return safely.
Now, the canceled shows at McCormick Place, they were expected to bring $1.6 billion in spending. According to your agency, how financially detrimental has this pandemic been to MPEA?
For MPEA, we've lost probably about $90 million that we would have received net. But for the local economy, which is our core mission, is to bring revenue into the local economy through conventions. It's been about $2.6 billion.
How does that affect, business or any operations? Obviously, there's not a lot happening, but what does that mean for the books?
So we look at it a little differently. We look at how are we affecting our city. What we pride ourselves in is bringing jobs to the city. So just on our campus, there are about nearly 3,000 workers regularly. We're down to probably about 400, and many of those are on furlough. And indirectly, as you know, the restaurants are impacted because they're not receiving the revenue that the delegates and attendees for these conventions would be bringing in. So the restaurants, the hotels, even the taxis and the airports, the jobs and the revenue are both down as a result of us not having those conventions.
So pretty big ripple effect, obviously, but you do have dozens of events at McCormick Place scheduled later this year, starting in June. I take it then, are you all probably paying pretty close attention to how the vaccine rollout is going and the effect that rollout might have on hopefully those conventions actually happening later?
Yes, we're very hopeful. Our goal is to just be prepared when the time is right and when the health officials allow us to do so. We have events right now. We have 47 events on our books beginning in July that are so excited, and they're patiently waiting for the time that we can say you can return. So we are looking forward to those events coming on our campus. And we're just going to continue to work with the health officials to make sure that the time is right.
How might conventions look different this year? I imagine having some sort of a virtual component might be important.
Yes, many of the conventions that canceled actually went virtual. They had their conventions virtual, but they also, with us, and one thing I'd like to mention is that they did reschedule. Many of them rebooked for future, near future, which we're excited to have. The way they will look different is when there's some things that you'll see when you walk in to the convention center that would be different, similar to when you go other places. You'll see that our meeting rooms, the seating is socially distanced. You'll see the sneeze guards with our food service areas. Catering will be a little different. We may have pre-plated items that we would typically serve, but they would be more pre-plated and packaged a little differently. And then behind the scenes, there's some things that we're doing. We know that we've learned from our health officials that outside airflow is important, so we've increased our outside airflow.
And tell us about the Healthy Meeting Chicago web portal that the MPEA is rolling out.
Yes, we, in collaboration with True Chicago, we recently launched our Healthy Meeting Chicago. It's an interactive digital platform that we wanted to showcase for those that will be returning to Chicago from other places, and even for those within Chicago that will be attending events, what their journey will be like from the time they arrive at one of our international airports until they arrive at their destination, which is either McCormick Place or one of our hotels.
Now, we've heard a lot of talk about a casino in Chicago. Lakeside Center at McCormick Place and Navy Pier have both been tossed out as potential locations for a casino. What might a casino bring to these convention centers and, of course, to the city of Chicago?
I would have to let the governor and the mayor answer those questions. I am not aware of the casino option being at either of those places at this time.
Yeah, I don't think it's certain at all. I think it's just been considered among the possibilities, among others around the city as well. But in the meantime, if that should ever come up, we look forward to having you back on the show to talk about it later on. Loretta Clark, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, how a new program prepares students for careers in music. Stick around. Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. What do you believe prevents a strong coalition of Black and Latino communities forming across the communities?
I want us to, as a nation, to find a way to come together.
Go down the block,
get it from someone local, and keep the money in the community.
Black joy and the Black experience is magical.
And we have much more ahead on the program, including our Spotlight Politics team talking about the vaccine rollout, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, and more. But first, a new initiative is working to change the landscape of classical music with a program dedicated to diversity. Arts correspondent Angel Ito has the story.
13-year-old Akosua Haynes has wanted to be a professional cellist for as long as she can remember. She's been playing for the past 9 years.
It doesn't have to feel like it's some rich person's sport to play violin or cello. It's for everyone.
With a passion for both music and science, her interest in both aligns with the mission of the Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative, for their students to pursue careers in both music and higher education. Project manager James Hall says their program serving students in grades 6 through 12 is debunking myths along the way.
A common misconception among parents before they join us is that, if our child gets a degree in music, they won't have many career opportunities available to them when they graduate, when in fact that's not true. There's a lot of different ways to support yourself financially while fulfilling yourself artistically.
The program kicked off its first year just before the pandemic hit, but that didn't stop them from offering a number of virtual resources to ensure students are prepared for that next step.
They play in youth orchestras, they attend summer music camp, they take weekly private lessons, they participate in master classes and mock auditions. So that's why I think it's really important to work with all these different organizations from around the city, because they all provide these essential experiences that we want our students to have.
These experiences are thanks to the partnerships they have with musical entities throughout the Chicago area. That's where mentors for the students are found. Student fellow Akosua says she and her mentor have a mutually beneficial relationship.
We're doing like actual Zoom calls where it's me practicing with her, her practicing with me, her giving me more information and advice on how to improve on cello.
Now, despite being practically raised in music programs similar to CMPI, Akosua says her experience in this program has been a little bit different. She recalls how she felt after her first performance as a student fellow.
Kind of felt like it was some kind of initiation, my first performance. And then I realized that I was kind of always a part of that family. It didn't need to be an initiation or anything. It needed to be just you're performing among friends, among family. It doesn't need to be a big thing.
We want our students in the future to be able to feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to their work. And I think a big part of that is representation. Being around people from similar backgrounds, who make you feel comfortable being yourself.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And the deadline to submit applications for the CMPI 2021-22 season is Friday. You can visit our website for more information. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, the stories of more than 100 men allegedly tortured by John Burge and his squad are detailed in a new archive. Exploring life after incarceration and the legal issues that come with it.
Many legislators asked if they could be vaccinated.
And the governor will wait for his vaccine as some newly released doses go into lawmakers' arms. That and more with our Spotlight Politics team. But first, some more of today's top stories. Former President Barack Obama and Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot say groundbreaking on the Presidential Center in Jackson Park is just months away. The Obama Foundation says it has completed 4 years of state, local, and federal reviews and finally has the all clear to build in Jackson Park. The mayor says work on utility lines will start April, with physical construction beginning as soon as August. The center was the subject of lawsuits from preservation groups saying it would alter the historic nature of the Olmsted-designed Jackson Park. The foundation estimates total construction costs to be around $500 million. And add another group of Illinoisans who are now eligible for the vaccine: state lawmakers. Governor Pritzker today added lawmakers into the Phase 1B vaccination group after several members and staff contracted COVID-19 after last month's session in Springfield. Both the Illinois House and Senate are expected to meet in Springfield next week. And now to Paris for a look at a new online archive of police torture survivors. Paris.
Thanks, Brandis. It's been nearly 3 decades since John Burge was fired from the Chicago Police Department, but a new archive released today documents years of torture he and his squad carried out against dozens of survivors. WTTW News reporter Matt Masterson joins us now with more. Matt, good to see you. First, remind us who John Burge was and the allegations that he faced.
So Burge, of course, was the notorious Area 2 commander who was said to have abused or overseen the abuse and torture of scores of largely black male suspects through what was called a midnight crew of officers in the Chicago Police Department throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s before he was ultimately fired from the Chicago Police Department in 1993.
And now the Chicago Police Torture Archive is up, spearheaded in part by John Conroy, the former reporter at The Reader that really broke all this torture news several years ago on John Burge. Tell us what this archive includes.
So it was from the Invisible Institute. John Conroy assisted as well, but the website includes just interviews with a bunch of Burge victims, as well as a timeline of the abuse throughout those decades that it was said to have gone on for. And it also includes just over 100,000 pages and case documents detailing all these allegations against these men that just went on for years and years and years.
And obviously should note Invisible Institute's key role in all of this. Does the Invisible Institute have any future plans for this archive?
Yeah, so they say that this archive is a work in progress. It's not a finished thing that they've just put out. They say that they want to add more materials, not only for Burge torture victims, but also for victims of other police abuse as well. And they say that they also want to track how well the city's following through on the $5.5 million reparations package that the city approved back in 2015 for victims of Burge and his associates. And to this point, they say that's not been all the way followed through on, so they're trying to keep tabs on how that goes going forward.
It's really a sordid saga that just continues year after year to try and find some resolution to all this. All right, Matt, thank you so much.
Thanks.
And you can read Matt's full story on our website. It's at WTTW.com/news. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thanks. We'll see you in a bit. In Illinois, there are more than 1,400 laws regulating the lives of people who are formerly incarcerated. That includes more than 1,000 employment regulations, 186 limiting political participation, and 21 housing statutes. The new book, Halfway Home: Race, Punishment, and the Afterlife of Mass Incarceration, examines these laws and how they affect the lives of people with felonies once they are out of prison. Joining us now with more is the author, Reuben Jonathan Miller, assistant professor at the University of Chicago Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy, and Practice. Reuben, welcome back. And I'm excited to talk to you about your book, so congratulations on that. What are some of the post-incarceration limits, all these laws that we just mentioned, that people have to deal with after they're released from prison?
Well, one of the major laws has to do with housing restrictions. So, for example, if someone with a felony record so much as visits someone in public housing, as of 1996, there's a federal guideline that suggests that the tenants can be evicted. And of course, there are housing restrictions both in public housing and in the private market, where landlords can evict people with criminal records and deny their applications without having any recourse. There's no recourse on the part of the person with the criminal record, even if they have the credit score. Additional laws on the books. It wasn't until about 2018 that there was a change in a restriction on people with criminal records, people with felony convictions specifically, not being able to get a barber's license or a cosmetology license. It took a legislative change to bring that about, despite them being trained to do so as barbers. And so there are hundreds of restrictions in the labor market and the housing market that make it close to impossible for people with criminal records to make a life for themselves after they return home without help from others.
And those rules, laws, statutes, obviously, they impact their families as well. You write about something called the economy of favors that folks who have been incarcerated previously depend on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there was the changes in liability laws beginning in 1980 that made it so employers, landlords, licensing officials, social service agencies could be sued if they provided care for someone with a criminal record. And the way that these entities responded was to restrict them from access to things like housing, employment, et cetera. Well, because a family member can be evicted, let's say, if a grandmother allows her grandson to sleep on the couch for an appreciable amount of time, what this does is this introduces a kind of tension. On the one hand, people with criminal records are made needy. And this is because of all these rules that prevent them from accessing the political economy. On the other hand, because of the punishments that get doled out onto family members, social service providers, employers, they're among the least desirable candidates to help. And so what they have to do to navigate what I call an economy of favors is convince people who are punished if they help them to, in fact, do them the favor of renting them an apartment, allowing them a place to stay, giving them a job, even if they're qualified.
And Ruben, like, just to play devil's advocate, you know, is that supervision, all those rules that come after being incarcerated, are those not designed or intended to prevent recidivism or from putting someone, for example, a foster child, if that person should be living in the home of a foster child, preventing those folks from being harmed?
Some of them, for sure. Some of them were designed with this in mind, with recidivism reduction or public safety or something like that in mind. And some of these are just reflexive responses from policymakers who have learned to write out people we're afraid of from full participation in politics, in society, in culture. I'll give you an example. One rule that's implemented in almost every state in the country is that people with felony records can't sit on juries. Jury duty has nothing to do with like whether or not you'll commit a crime. But what ends up happening is when someone with a criminal record goes before a jury, it is almost never then a jury of their peers. And in fact, their prior criminal convictions are used against them. Prosecutors are allowed to charge them with extra charges because of something called sentencing enhancements. So on the one hand, they're restricted from being allowed for people who understand their experience from judging them, as it were, from being their jury. And on the other hand, their criminal records can put them away for much longer.
Now, Ruben, before we let you go, beyond your work as, you know, a scholar and a social scientist, you have your own personal experiences with your father and your brother having been incarcerated. Why did you want to write this book?
You know, it's interesting. I was born poor and Black in Chicago on the South Side after 1972, which is the year that mass incarceration begins in earnest. And so I've decided to write myself and my family into this story because I couldn't avoid the prison if I wanted to. The prison follows you. It's like a ghost, always there. And so I wanted to make sure that people understood not just whether or not someone can get a job, but what it's like to be a family member, to love someone who's had a criminal record, who's locked out of the political economy, and what it's like to be someone with a criminal record, though I don't have one, I write from the perspective of the hundreds of people that I spoke with, as they navigate these systems.
And we've got just a couple of seconds left. The book title, Halfway Home, it's a play on words.
Yes, absolutely. On the one hand, so I did about 3.5 years of participant observation in halfway houses in Chicago. So on the one hand, there's the halfway house itself. And on the other hand, it represents being stuck. You know, what does it mean to never quite make it home? And home is something that we make for people. And the way to make home for people is to not think so much about public safety, but to think about belonging. What kind of society would we have if we constructed it in such a way that even people that we're afraid of have a place in it? This is the question I try to raise in this book.
All right, Reuben Jonathan Miller, thank you so much. Again, the book is called Halfway Home, Race, Punishment, and the Afterlife of Mass Incarceration. And again, my thanks to Reuben Jonathan Miller for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, our Spotlight Politics team on the COVID vaccine rollout. But first, a look at the weather. The tug of war between the Chicago Teachers Union and Chicago Public Schools is still going on as we speak, as the vaccine rollout bumps along. That and more is the focus of this week's edition of Spotlight Politics. Joining us once again are Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. So, starting, of course, with Chicago Public Schools, negotiations continue between the union and CPS leaders. This is, as Amanda reported earlier, after the 48-hour cooling-off period comes to a close tonight. Amanda, both sides say they are inching closer. What happens next?
Brandis, wouldn't we all love to know? Me, as a resident of Chicago, concerned, of course, for the welfare of teachers, students in regards to the coronavirus, their education, hundreds of thousands of individuals affected, and then, of course, the potential for the community safety. And then parents, really, they have to be feeling so anxious, not knowing what is in store, if school is going to be in session tomorrow, whether it will be remote or whether we'll have the option to send them to the classroom. I, for one, kind of highly doubt that something would turn around that quickly at this late hour. So we don't know. We're waiting word. Brandis, actually, you're an education reporter. What are you hearing are the big sticking points?
Actually, I'm texting sources from the set right now, but we're hearing that the big points, I think, are vaccines and making some sort of a plan to ensure that teachers can at least have access to the vaccine before they're heading back into schools, and also around making accommodations. So far, the district says that they have granted accommodations, medical accommodations, to teachers who've asked for them, but for those who might live with a loved one who might be immunocompromised, not all of those accommodations have been granted, and I think there's still a lot to be worked out there. I think it's important to note, we're not sure what's going to happen tonight. I'm hearing from a source they could be back on to remote learning tomorrow, but Friday is actually a teacher planning day, so students were not to have learning that day. And then I think we know some bad weather is going to come on Monday, so I don't know if it'll be to the point where the district would have to make the decision to close schools if the world weren't as it is right now. So I think
we're getting a little extra time.
Yes, it might be buying them some time. We'll see. Heather, some parents, though, have said that they feel like their kids, their students, are in the middle of this and that they're being pawns. CDC says schools are safe. What is the fight there?
Well, it's really complicated, and there was quite a bit of back and forth about this today, with the director of the CDC saying that teachers did not need to be vaccinated before schools reopened for in-person learning. And we saw the CPS Twitter account jump on that, retweeting it, saying, pointing that out. But then the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, said, well, wait a minute, Joe Biden, the president, really wants teachers to be safe. So that's not our official guidance. So again, Chicago parents, Chicago students, Chicago teachers are sort of caught in the middle of this debate. And it's really quite amazing. We're almost, 11 months into this pandemic, and it's still not entirely clear what the science says. And there are a lot of parents, a lot of teachers who would much rather be safe than sorry and stay remote. But on the other hand, you have the mayor really pushing to restart in-person learning because she says it's been such a failure for some Black and Latino students.
I mean, I've got whiplash. I imagine the parents do as well. Paris, so far, 3,700 CPS workers have been vaccinated. CTU says 1,000 vaccines per week is not enough. Is that a good start? What are we hearing about exactly how many vaccines CTU could be up for a week?
Well, just right now, according to Greg Pratt at the Tribune, he tweeted that CPS is offering a reported 1,500 vaccinations per week, which certainly isn't really going to be enough to get teachers vaccinated at a level where I think they'll feel comfortable reopening all schools for a long, long time. I'm also told by multiple sources that the Lightfoot administration has taken the plea to the Biden administration directly to ask the president for more vaccines for Chicago public schools, specifically for teachers. Because of this, there's also a letter that they drafted, that they delivered to the Illinois congressional delegation to deliver to Biden, asking for more vaccines. I'm told that they have not delivered that letter yet to the president because they're awaiting what happens tonight with negotiations. They've got their fingers crossed that they won't need to deliver that letter, but that this sort of the ace in the hole here, the last gasp effort here, is to appeal directly to Biden to get more vaccinations for teachers.
So switching gears a bit, but still talking about this vaccine and, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic more broadly, the state is diverting 97,000 vaccines from a federal program. Here's what the governor said about why there is a surplus at the state's long-term care facilities.
As it turns out, they counted every bed and not every person. As you know, there are facilities that aren't full. In addition, they assumed that every person that would be offered, including staff, would take the vaccine. That also has not been the case. So essentially, there's been a reallocation out of that to make sure that we can get as many vaccines into the arms of as many people as possible.
So, Amanda, explain what's going to happen with those 97,000 vaccines.
Well, so Brandon, this really gets down to, I think, a whole lot of pressure on Governor Pritzker, on all of our elected officials. People want this vaccine. There simply is not enough of it to go around at this point in time. And so this is a nod to the pressure that he is under to do something to redistribute. And that's exactly what this is doing. Mind you, part to sort of what Paris was saying earlier, Chicago, other large cities in the United States get their own specific allocation. That is separate and apart from what is given to states. And then originally, there was also a separate vaccine shipment given for those in long-term care facilities. Given that there is that surplus, it is instead going to be sort of divvied up in areas around the state. And frankly, the areas surrounding Chicago should get a lot of that because that's where a whole lot of the population is. And so local health departments, pharmacies are going to be getting those to give to folks that are in the 1B stage primarily.
And Heather, you covered a story that the city is going to be using this new sign-up site. How will this help the bottleneck that people over 65 have been running into when signing up for a vaccine?
Well, it is ZocDoc, and you can go to ZocDoc and you can put in your information and it can tell you whether you're eligible for the vaccine, and it will give you a list of available appointments. So this is designed to find appointments at hospitals, at pharmacies, and as well as at the city's mass vaccination sites. And this is really to prevent people from having to check Walgreens and then to check Walmart and then to check Mariano's and then to just check, all the way around. And it was, really eating up hours of people's days. So this is a centralized site. However, the main issue remains the supply of the vaccine. There just isn't enough supply out there to vaccinate everybody in 1B. For example, in Chicago, that is 700,000 people alone. So it is going to take some time. The city is still saying be patient, but they're hoping that this one site will keep it a little bit easier on people as they keep hitting that refresh button to try to find an appointment.
And Amanda, before we get to City Council, the state's also allowing lawmakers to join the 1B category. We've heard the governor earlier say that he's going to wait to get his. But what does this mean? Has there been pushback if lawmakers are allowed to join that category?
Oh, yeah, most certainly. I mean, in a way, no, you've had members of Congress get the vaccine without much ado. Mayor Lori Lightfoot herself got that shot in the arm, and it was seen as, all right, she's out and about. That said, I do think there's a whole lot of pushback when we've been talking about there isn't enough to go around. People are sick of being at home. They are scared of getting sick, and now they feel as if they are essentially having somebody cut in line in front of them. This in a state where, of course, corruption is continuously a problem, and people worry about the perks that politicians get, and this will allow those who wouldn't otherwise be eligible, because of course elected officials who are of age in 1B would be able to get it and wait in line just like the rest of us. They're going to be able to leapfrog. So Democrats say it's necessary to conduct government. Republicans, they're mad.
So there's a shuffling of city council leadership. Mayor Lori Lightfoot loses her floor leader, Alderman Gilbert Villegas, midterm. Heather, why now? Has another floor leader ever left in the middle of term before?
Not in recent Chicago political history. Mayor Rahm Emanuel had one floor leader for all of his 8 years. Mayor Lori Lightfoot's floor leader lasted all of 18 months. And I think there's no doubt that the mayor's tense relationship with the city council has really played a role in that. We talked a lot on the show about how the mayor's property tax hike passed with only 2 votes to spare. That is an incredibly slim margin. And there was no doubt that Alderman Villegas faced a huge task in trying to get the mayor's agenda pushed through. He will be replaced by Alderman Michelle Harris, who has been an alderman for a long time. She is a protege of former Cook County Board President John Stroger, and she knows how to get the sausage made behind the scenes. She was also a close ally of Mayor Rahm Emanuel, which means perhaps Mayor Lightfoot is going to have to explain why she promised to bring in the light, but is turning to some old political hands back at City Hall.
All right, now quickly in D.C., there's a lot going on, including Illinois senior Senator Dick Durbin, who Paris just spoke with, taking over the Senate Judiciary from Lindsey Graham, who was stonewalling Merrick Garland's confirmation hearing to become the Attorney General. So let's hear what Senator Durbin said to Paris earlier in the program about working across the aisle on this.
I want to work with these Republican senators who disagreed with this hearing. I think they've made a mistake, and I wish they'd have thought twice before they made their decision. But I'm not going to burn this bridge. I've got to find ways to work with them in the future. I'm just going to do it as quickly as I can and play by the rules.
So, Paris, briefly, is Senator Durbin officially in charge of the Judiciary Committee? And if so, why can't he call the hearing for Garland on Monday?
Right. Brandon, more than 2 weeks into the new Senate, finally, Senator Durbin is in charge, reflecting the fact that the Democrats do have control, albeit the very slightest control in the Senate, 51-50, with the tie-breaking vote of Vice President Kamala Harris. What Durbin told me was that he can schedule the hearing for when he wants, but he has to give a 7-day notice unless Republicans on the committee decide to waive that, which he says they're not going to do. So that clearly means that Garland is not going to have a hearing until probably after the impeachment trial of Donald Trump in the Senate. So it's probably going to be the week after next. This, as there's that massive investigation going on in the Justice Department of what happened on January 6th. It's curious why Lindsey Graham, the Republican former chairman of the committee, was slow-walking that nomination, and that's something that drew Senator Durbin's ire. Now Durbin's in charge, but his hands are tied a little bit, and it looks like that post will go unfilled at least for the next week or two.
All right, and I was hoping we'd have time to talk about Adam Kinzinger. So much to talk about, so little time. Yeah. My thanks to our Spotlight Politics team, Amanda Venicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. A look at how rideshare drivers are managing during the pandemic. And Jeffrey Baer on the past, present, and future of a historic garden in North Lawndale. And we leave you tonight with a performance by student fellow Kaylee Holiday from the Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative. Now for Paris Schutz and all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that's proud to serve its community through pro bono legal services.